Let me be real with you. This one's gonna hurt a little. Because when you're dealing with someone who pulls away just when things get close, just when it starts to matter, you feel powerless. Like you're the one always trying, reaching, texting first, fixing everything, waiting for crumbs. But here's the truth, you don't reach an avoidant heart by chasing it. You reach it by stepping back into your own. Let that sink in. Because if you're running toward them, you're not standing strong in your power. And avoidant people, they feel unsafe with emotional closeness, not because you're too much, but because they never learn to stay when love gets real. They feel overwhelmed by emotional need, even if that need is human and healthy. So the moment you start chasing, they bolt. But the moment you stop, the game changes. You want to reach their heart, then stop sprinting after it like it's the prize. You are the prize. This isn't about manipulating or withholding love. It's about self-respect with boundaries that speak louder than words. You hold your ground. You become a mirror that reflects both truth and calm, not chaos. Start showing up differently. Stop arguing for connection. Stop performing for validation. And for the love of all that's good, stop begging to be seen. Instead, see yourself, hear yourself, validate yourself. If they can't meet you at the table, you don't flip it over. You sit at your own, and that is when something powerful happens. That avoidant heart, it might start to feel safe for the first time, not because you chased it, but because you stopped playing their emotional hide and seek. And even if they never come closer, you will to yourself, and that's the only closeness that never runs. When you're in love with someone avoidant, your natural instinct might be to close the gap, to fix things, to reach out every time they pull away. You tell yourself, if I can just show them how much I care, they'll stay. If I give more, they'll feel safe. If I explain one more time, they'll understand. But let me tell you something hard and real. Every time you chase, you confirm their fear. You become the proof they didn't even know they were looking for. That closeness means losing control. That intimacy means suffocation. And that love demands more than they can give. Your chasing is not interpreted as love in their nervous system. It's interpreted as pressure. Avoidant people aren't broken. They're just wired differently because of how they learn to protect themselves. Maybe they grew up with inconsistent caregivers. Maybe they were punished for needing too much. Maybe love was a transaction, not a connection. Whatever the reason, somewhere along the way, they decided it was safer to need less, to feel less, to stay a step back. So when you run toward them with intensity, even if it's love-driven, it doesn't feel safe. It feels like being emotionally cornered. Now here's what makes it harder. If you have an anxious pattern, chasing might feel natural. It might even feel noble. You think you're fighting for the relationship, proving your loyalty, showing up. But to the avoidant person, it often lands as an emotional invasion. They shut down, they say they need space, they go quiet, and what do? You chase harder, you send the text, you apologize for things that weren't your fault. You try to love louder, thinking it'll break the wall. But that's not how the wall comes down. You don't chase an avoidant heart into trusting you. You stop chasing, period. And it's not because you're giving up. It's because you finally realize that the only way to create real connection is to stop participating in a pattern that only creates more distance. When you stop chasing, you stop proving their worst fears true. You give them space not as punishment, but as permission. You create stillness instead of pressure. And in that stillness, something surprising happens. They get curious. They notice the calm. They feel something shift. Maybe for the first time, they feel that love isn't going to swallow them whole. Maybe they take a step forward on their own, and if they don't, that's okay too, because your power isn't in getting them to move. It's in realizing you don't have to lose yourself just to be loved. The chasing ends when you remember that you are not a rescue mission. You are not responsible for healing what someone else refuses to face. Most people think connection is about talking more, texting more, fixing things quickly, or pouring out all your feelings so the other person knows how much you care. But when you're dealing with someone avoidant, that approach often backfires. You think being emotionally available and expressive will build intimacy, but for them, it can feel overwhelming, even threatening. Avoidant individuals often equate closeness with danger, even when they desperately want love deep down. So when you're constantly reaching, constantly explaining, constantly filling the silence, it doesn't draw them in. It makes them withdraw further. It activates their fear of engulfment. That's why calm presence, not emotional pursuit, is the real key to connection. There's something incredibly powerful about not reacting. When they pull away and you don't chase, when they go silent and you don't fill the gap with anxious energy, when they create space and you let them, not because you're playing games, but because you're rooted in your own sense of security, calmness is disarming. It's the opposite of pressure. It's what allows someone who fears closeness to take a breath and realize they're not being suffocated. Emotional pursuit feels like being chased down a hallway with no exit. But emotional stillness, that feels like being given room to breathe, to choose, to feel safe stepping forward. It's important to understand that calm doesn't mean cold. It doesn't mean shutting off your feelings or pretending not to care. It means regulating your own nervous system so that you're not reacting from panic, from fear of abandonment, or from the need to fix everything immediately. Calm presence says, I care, but I'm not going to lose myself trying to get you to show up. That's powerful. That's the energy that creates true safety. And let's be honest, this isn't easy, especially if you've been taught that love equals effort, equals sacrifice, equals doing everything you can to keep someone from walking away. But real connection doesn't grow in a climate of emotional pressure. It grows in environments where people feel free to come closer without being yanked in. Avoidant people don't need you to chase them. They need to feel that when they do open up, even slightly, they're not going to be smothered or overwhelmed by a flood of emotion. So, instead of over-explaining or proving your worth, try being grounded. Instead of flooding them with texts, let them miss you. Instead of reacting to every moment of distance, respond with presence, not performance. When they realize that your love isn't a trap, that your energy isn't chaotic, that your connection doesn't require them to abandon themselves to meet your needs, something inside them softens. Their guard doesn't come down all at once, but it begins to lower, not because you pushed it, but because your calm gave them permission to lay it down on their own. That is the kind of presence that truly connects. Not loud, Boundaries
not
often
desperate,
get misunderstood
not
as being
demanding,
harsh
just
or
steady,
selfish,
grounded, and
especially
real.
when you're used to overgiving in relationships. But boundaries aren't about pushing people away. They're about creating clarity for you and for them. When you set healthy boundaries, you're not saying, I don't care. You're saying, I care about myself too. And that's the exact energy that begins to shift the dynamic with an avoidant person. Because when you stop overextending yourself, when you stop constantly giving without receiving, you stop feeding a lopsided emotional structure that's already tipping over. With avoidant partners, it's easy to fall into a pattern where you become the emotional caretaker, always reading their cues, managing their discomfort, tiptoeing around their triggers, trying to be easy to love, and without even realizing it, you start losing pieces of yourself. You silence your needs, you dilute your emotions, you become so focused on not scaring them off that you abandon your own emotional reality. That's not connection, that's self-erasure, and it doesn't make the relationship stronger. It makes it brittle. Boundaries are the antidote, they say. I will not shrink to make you stay. They say, I am available for love, but not at the expense of my mental peace. You don't have to punish, threaten, or make a big dramatic exit. You simply become clear about what you will and won't allow. If they ghost for days, you don't blow up their phone. You choose to match their energy without bitterness. If they avoid emotional conversations every time you get vulnerable, You don't keep pleading, you express your truth calmly, and then let your actions speak when it isn't honored. Boundaries aren't loud, they're consistent, and they're magnetic. When someone is avoidant, they subconsciously test for control. They want to know if closeness means losing their autonomy. When you set a boundary not to manipulate, but to protect your emotional space, you show them that intimacy doesn't have to mean invasion. You show them that you can love someone and still say no. That kind of emotional maturity is rare and deeply attractive to someone who's always felt relationships require them to give up too much. Boundaries also allow them to feel safe approaching you because they know where you stand. There's no guessing, no walking on eggshells. When you're clear, they can breathe. When you're solid, they don't have to brace for emotional chaos. This doesn't mean they'll instantly become emotionally fluent or dive headfirst into vulnerability, but it means you're no longer enabling their avoidance by making yourself endlessly available or emotionally overexposed. Instead, you're saying, here is what healthy love looks like. I won't chase you into connection, but I'll stay open if you want to meet me halfway. And here's the secret: boundaries don't push away the right people. They push away the ones who only benefited from your lack of them. If someone truly wants to connect, your boundaries won't scare them. They'll respect them. They'll rise to meet them. And slowly, that's when real intimacy begins.
We live in a world where we're
taught to believe that words fix everything.
But from strength.
If you just say the right thing, send the right text, express yourself enough, they'll finally get it. But with an avoidant heart, that rarely works. In fact, the more you talk, plead, or try to make them understand, the more you can end up pushing them away. Because for someone avoidant, emotions feel like landmines. They don't trust vulnerability, not in themselves and not in others. So when you try to reach them through intensity or demand, it feels like pressure, not love. That's why you don't reach them through more words. You reach them through action. And not just any action, but the kind rooted in self-respect, emotional stability, and a release of outcome. When you detach from outcome, you're not giving up. You're just letting go of the illusion that your worth depends on how someone else responds. You stop trying to control their emotional journey. You stop trying to manage their fears. And you start managing your own energy instead. That shift changes everything. Because when someone avoids closeness, what they fear most is being consumed. They don't want to feel responsible for someone else's happiness. So when you come with an agenda trying to get them to open up, to commit, to talk about feelings, they sense that emotional expectation and it makes them retreat. But when you act from emotional maturity, when you stop seeking their validation and instead validate yourself, you're sending a different message. You're saying, I can handle my emotions, I can hold space for yours, but I won't chase, I won't beg, I won't twist myself into knots trying to earn love. And that calm, confident energy, that's the kind of energy an avoidant heart can slowly start to trust, because it feels safe, it feels steady. It doesn't demand, it invites. Self-respect means you don't override your own needs just to maintain the connection. It means you don't say yes to crumbs just because you're afraid of being alone. It means you recognize when you're being emotionally starved and have the strength to feed yourself instead of waiting for someone else to change. You model the very intimacy you desire not by chasing it, but by living it. You treat yourself with care, with boundaries, with patience. You show up for yourself first. And in doing so, you show them what secure love actually looks like. When your actions speak clearly, when you say less, hold your ground, and live from a place of inner strength, they start to see a different version of love. One that isn't chaotic. One that isn't needy. One that doesn't require them to be someone they're not. And that's when something in them might begin to shift. Not because you forced them to change, but because your presence created space for them to reconsider what love could be. Ultimately, reaching an avoidant heart is less about convincing and more about embodying. It's not about getting them to feel safe. It's about being someone who is safe, There's this
And that
idea
begins
many
the
people
moment
carry
you
around,
choose action over
that unless
pleading,
someone comes back to
clarity over
validate your worth,
confusion, and
unless they change
self-worth
or
over
apologize
codependency,
or finally see your value, you've lost. But that's not how healing works. That's not how love should be measured. When you've loved someone who is emotionally avoidant and you've done the inner work, the real transformation doesn't come from them choosing you. It comes from you finally choosing yourself. And when you do that, even if they never show up the way you hoped, you still win. Because reaching an avoidant heart was never about changing them. It was about remembering yourself in the process. So many people get stuck in the cycle of waiting, waiting for a text, waiting for emotional openness, waiting for closure, and that waiting becomes a trap. You spend days, weeks, sometimes years, stuck in limbo, believing that when they finally come around, you'll feel whole again. But you don't have to wait to be free. You don't have to wait for them to heal to start healing yourself. You can stop chasing, stop wondering, stop making someone else's emotional availability the measurement of your worth. Because your peace does not depend on their progress. Your joy doesn't need their cooperation. In fact, the very moment you stop waiting, when you stop giving your power to someone who keeps avoiding it, that's the moment everything changes. You shift the focus back where it belongs, inward. You start reconnecting with your own heart, the one you kept quiet for too long, trying not to scare them off. You begin to reclaim the energy you spent overthinking, overanalyzing, and overgiving. And when you do, you realize how much power you truly have not to change them, but to change the way you love yourself. And here's what's even more surprising. Sometimes when you stop chasing, the avoidant person begins to soften. Not because you manipulated them, not because you played games, but because your absence of pressure creates the one thing they need to feel safe, space. You stop being a source of emotional urgency, and they begin to see you as emotionally safe. They may reach out, step closer, or finally reflect on the walls they've built. And if they do, they'll be stepping into a healthier version of you, one that no longer begs for love, but knows how to receive it with grace. But even if they never come closer, even if they stay walled off in their comfort zone of distance and detachment, you still come closer to yourself. And that's the win, that's the gift, because the goal was never just to reach them. It was to return to your own center, to find your voice, your boundaries, your worth. That's what makes the pain purposeful. That's what turns heartbreak into healing. When you stop chasing, you finally have the space to rise, not as someone they finally choose, but as someone who never needed to be chosen to be complete. So if you take anything away from this, let it be this. You don't reach an avoidant heart by chasing it. You reach it by standing firmly in your own. Love that's real doesn't demand you lose yourself. It invites you to become more of who you truly are. Whether they come closer or not, you win the moment you stop running after someone and start walking toward yourself. Thank you for showing up today with an open heart, the courage to grow, and the strength to choose self-respect over fear. You are worthy of love that stays, and it begins with you.